morning. Good morning.
Chaim David has that.
Can I ask? I know this is going to be outrageous and ludicrous on my part. Can I ask for something we rarely ask for? Can I have your attention? That means could you take antisocial plugs out of ears?
We're having a speech now.
Ooh, a speech I'm giving. I gotta give a speech. Okay, 4 score. So we're headed today to the second holiest location on the planet. It's traditionally, the Mekubalim call it one of the 4 holy cities in order of holiness. Reasonably, we would say number 1,
Jerusalem.
Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh. There are those who are makpid not to. I mean, the halacha is to tear kriya if you haven't seen the area of the Beis Hamikdash and its destruction once every 30 days, right? So there's an Indian. If you live in Yerushalayim, we don't tear kriya. The assumption is, of course, you're going to go at least once every 30 days. As we pass, you'll spot the site where the Beis Hamikdash stood. There's a golden dome there instead, unfortunately. You can glance at it and remember that we're not quite where we should be. Second holiest place in the world? Chevron Yer Kodesh. And we'll make the case today why it's a place of incredible importance. Who's been before?
Only when I was
Who's never been? Third? It's 5. Some would say 4th because it's a later edition, only from the 16th century. It's counted as one of the 4. And the third?
Derek Base Medrash.
Derek Base Medrash for sure. Tiberia, the Makom where the Yerushalmi, the Mesivta al-Hayam. These correspond to the 4 elements they like to darshan. So Yerushalayim, which is Aish, fire, the fire of Torah. It was destroyed by fire, and it will be rebuilt with fire. You have, let's go backwards, let's go with Tzfas. Tzfas, of course, is air, Ruach, Ruchnius, spirituality, Tiberia. On the Yam, on the sea, it's the water of Torah. Leaving Chevron, Chevron is earth. Chevron is the first real estate purchased by a Jew in the world. Avraham Avinu purchased it from Ephron, Achiti, 400 kesef shekel, over Lasocher. Right? It was a grand purchase. It was one of 3 places that was bought fair and square by a Jew. Avram bought Maras Machpelah in Chevron. What was the second place? 2 generations later? 2 generations later. Yaakov bought Shechem for Me'aksita, Pasuk says, and the third one many generations later. We're about to look at it. David Melech pays. In one pasuk, it's 50 shekels, and another, it's 600 shekels. Right? Gemara Zvachim teaches how that works together. Well, if it's 50 shekels from each of the tribes, of the 12 tribes, you get to 600. One way of understanding it.
Aish was $1.
Or better exchange rate back in those days. Anyway, the Medrash says on these 3 places, we bought it fair and square. We have the deeds of purchase, and this way, nobody in history will ever be able to contest the Jews' ownership to these locations. So good. We're going to a place that's not contested. There's no problem, no security issues whatsoever. Don't know why you're driving on a protected bus. Somehow the Goyim never got that Medrash to our great misfortune. Take a look at the holiest place in the world. The dome will be gone one day, and there'll be a big Beis Hamikdash there, much grander than any of its predecessors.
What a zoom-in guy! Let me show with the filming skills.
The reason I did something outrageous and asked for you to take out antisocial plugs and other such things, some of you actually did that, and some of you didn't, is because Chevron is something that's better understood if you know what you're looking at. And I don't have much time, and we're there for a short visit, and we're going ziplining, having a good time later on this afternoon. So in the precious time that I have, and it includes the time we have in the bus, I'm going to do my best to try to make the case why you should be thrilled that we get the schus of going to Chevron. Chevron, which was not accessible to Jews in large parts of history. Today, it's seen as sort of less accessible because it's deep in Arab territory, in what's called Yehuda, in Yehuda v'Shomron. Is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? These are relative kinds of questions. Shomer B'Sayim Hashem, Jews go there all the time. And we should certainly stay alert. We're in wartime, we should be aware of such things. There will be a police presence, an army presence there. You'll you will not be confused. It's very, very, very clear and all around. When our ancestors would come to Eretz HaKodesh, those few fortunate souls who managed the journey and managed to come here, it was without question nothing to talk about. They came to Yerushalayim, Eretz HaKodesh, and the second stop was Chevron. Rambam came in 1167. He, like most people, came to the port of Akko, kissed the ground in Akko, thanked the Kadosh Baruch Hu after being a refugee since he was 15 years old. His family had been traveling for decades in the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, and finally he reached the coast of Eretz Yisroel. That day that he reached Akko was a holiday for the Rambam and for his descendants for generations. They celebrated just the very fact that the Rambam could step foot on this holy soil that we tend to take for granted because we get off airplanes with relative ease and don't really consider
Baruch Hashem
what we have. We don't consider what we have. When he came to Yerushalayim, that day became a holiday again for himself and for his descendants for generations. And when he came to Chevron, the third holiday, and Rambam who teaches this halacha, the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam seems to break from style, gets very emotional when he writes about visiting the Mars Machpelah, the tomb of the four couples, Adam and Chava, Avram, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, and Leah. And of course, some of you are thinking, Esav's head. There's a less known later Messiah that Rachel was even reburied there. Initially, Rachel on the way, and later on brought to Mars Machpelah. But it was a place for generations Jews went to. Let me just give you what was the significance of Chevron. Chevron, first of all, was the capital of the Jews before there was Yerushalayim, Eretz Kodesh. Yerushalayim was still Yavus before David conquered it, one of the 7 Canaanite nations, with Gei Ben Hinnom you're looking at right here. Right, this is the portal to Gehenna between 2 palm trees somewhere. We're still looking for them. In Yerushalayim, ironically. Chevron, in contrast, is the portal to
Evan.
Gan Eden. In fact, that's why it was selected when Avram Avinu was grazing his sheep in the area, and one of them fell into a pit. He went to go bring it back, and he smelled the fragrance of Gan Eden. Nothing like it in the world. And that's in Chevron. I'm trying to figure out what's the deal. Why is this the portal of Gehenna, and that's the portal of Gan Eden? Maybe it should be intuitively the opposite. This is the capital of the world. Shouldn't this be the entrance to Gan Eden?
How do you know what it smelled like?
He was Avram Avinu.
Oh,
You're not.
Fair enough.
Yitzchak knew too. That's why he was suspicious when Yaakov, pretending he's Esav, comes in for the bracha. He was suspicious because Esav stank like a hunter. Yaakov smelled like Gan Eden. So they all somehow were tuned into this. We're going to say the truth is there's an Indian halacha, even though we have not left the city limits, but since we're on the journey already, there's an Indian to say tefillas aderech, and we should say that today. And we've announced on previous Julian, but we haven't been on one in a long time, so let's just refresh our memories. It is a tefillah as much as it's a bracha at the end, and as a tefillah, the poskim bring that it's ideal that we each say it ourselves, and so it's recommended that you do that. But if you don't know it and don't want to say it, whatever reason, somebody's going to get up in the middle of the bus right now and say the bracha out loud and be motzias. Yeah, and Marcus, can I? You're a good location. Can I ask you to say tefillas there? Actually, on a street called Derech Chevron. This is the traditional street. All the avos imahos, everybody big in history, walked this way. We just passed a location where they found in what's known, at least to scholarship, whatever that means today, the oldest fragment of the Torah in the world. We could see it maybe on a good day in the Israel Museum. We missed it last year because they put it away for the war, but it's there somewhere, and it was found just back there.
It's just one fragment, or
it looks like a little kameh, a little amulet from about 2,700 years ago. Right, we're talking about Bais Rishon, First Temple period.
That's crazy.
Right. It kind of makes you. I remember when I was a shallow, non-religious Californian kid, and my dad said, "You're going to Eretz Yisroel for a year." That was before my junior year abroad in 86, 87. And he said, you're going to a place of great history. Today, you walk out of California, what are you going to find historical? In Yerushalayim Kodesh, they found a fragment. Anybody know what was written on the fragment?
Birkas Kohanim.
Birkas Kohanim. Birkas Kohanim. You can look it up. Look it up. Anyway, that was right back there, and it makes so much sense because this was a major thoroughfare. It makes sense, really. Or Sameach sits on the same thoroughfare, the same major avenue of traffic that the ancients walked through, and it makes sense that they walked this way because really the holy part of Eretz Yisroel sits on a mountain, and this is the spine of the mountain. On every side are peaks and valleys, but this is the one flat spine. If you're a traveler, and people traveled a lot in the ancient world, it makes no sense to go in the peaks and the valleys. That increases your journey too much. But you go on the spine, you make a straight line to where you're going. So everybody walked on this way. It was true for Jews. It was true for Muslims too, who were here for a good part of the history. What they call Jaffa Gate, because Jews traveled to Eretz Yisroel by way of Yafo, of Jaffa, and they would go on the main street in Jaffa, which of course is called Yerushalayim Street, because they're headed towards Yerushalayim. And in Yerushalayim it's called Jaffa Street, because when you leave here you go to Jaffa. And the gate is called Jaffa Gate. Anybody know the name of the gate in Arabic? Jaffa Gate, in the old city. They call it Bab, which is gate. El Khalil. El Khalil, Arabic, anybody? Means to the beloved, to the friend. That's Ibrahim to the Arabs. Ibrahim, of course, is the father of Ismail, so he's a beloved figure. Of course, later on, they had to have everything, so they also took the area that they call Yitzchak and Rivka, even though they shouldn't really be interested in that. They only cared about Ibrahim. But this is on the way. Why is it called Bab el Khalil? Because from Jaffa Gate, you don't just go to Yafo in the west, you go south to Chevron, Ira Kodesh. Chevron has multiple names in the Torah. Do you know the names of Chevron? One we made reference to, the four holy couples who are buried there, actually there was a village formed around them, and is referred to therefore as the village of the four. In Hebrew you'd say, today there's a pretty large 8,000 people in this city right next to Hebron called Kiryat Arba. Kiryas Arba. So that's synonymous with Chevron. It's also referred to as Mamre and Eshkol. So comes the Kli Yakar. When you're stuck, you're looking for a good Dvar Torah. That's one of the go-to Mefarshim for a great Dvar Torah. He says this. He says Chevron, which is the portal to Gan Eden, signifies an entry point from this world to the next world, in a good way. And so if Chevron is a portal between life and death, each of these names conveys a different aspect of that passage, of going to death. The lowest way to die, of course, is in a state of rishus. But Baruch Hashem, all the holy people here are working themselves towards a place of being a major tzaddik. But there are nebuch people in the world, many of them, most of them, who are in the status of Rasha. A Rasha who dies, he lives a rebel, he dies a rebel. Yesterday we learned in the Pele Yoetz, he asked the question, why did Hashem create Rishayim? If Hashem's not in time, he knows how they're going to turn out. What was the point? And he says through a Zohar, we don't know the answer. We don't know Hashem's ways. His ways are perfect. But these are questions that are beyond us ultimately. A rebel in Hebrew is a mumar. Sometimes a mumar l'te'avon, he can't help it. Oh, I want to serve Hashem, but wow, that KFC looks so good. And sometimes he's a mumar lahachis. Sometimes he just wants to rebel to make Hashem angry. We know people like this too, who are just out to do bad things. So those people die, they're mamrim. That's mamre. You have that quality potentially in Chevron. We know there are other people, many people in the world who are good people. They're not tzaddikim. They have their attributes. They have their failures, right? So what happens to them is when they leave this world, there's sadness. When people are bereft, actually this is a Torah word. When people are bereft, they leave their loved ones shakul, which means sad, empty, feeling somehow something's not irreplaceable in the world. That's eshkol. But when a tzaddik dies, and whose death do we associate greatly with Chevron?
Sarah
Imenu dies, right? When a righteous person dies, we're going to explore this idea too. the tzaddikim don't actually die. And that's conveyed even in the name of the parsha. What is the name of the parsha in which Sarah dies? It's called Parshas Chaye Sarah. How ironic, or perhaps it's not ironic, because in death she's really still alive. So on this pasuk, when Avram buries Sarah, it says she dies b'Chevron he Kiryas Arba he Chevron. So then he gets Kabbalistic, and he points out that just like the four holy cities correspond to each of the four elements in the world, so too do all humans have in them the four elements that make up the world: earth and ruach, air, and fire. There's fire in us too, and we have the fire of Torah, at least to drive our passion, right? And water. And death is defined when these four elements decompose. But a tzaddik never totally decomposes. They are a city, they're a kiria of Arba. The four elements are still there, and we'll tell stories, legends maybe, about how the tzaddikim didn't die. And for many generations, they have eyewitness accounts of meeting up with the avos and the imahos. I mean, it says that explicitly by Yaakov. It says by Yigva Yaakov. It doesn't say he died. And the Gemara says explicitly, Yaakov Avinu lo meis, didn't die. And of course, when Sarah dies these last two enviable deaths, she dies Kiryas Arba. The four elements are not really, they're not torn apart. And the ultimate death of the greatest tzaddik is by way of, you know this, very, very deep idea. What's it called? Well, Mesiras Nefesh, that's right. When a person dies al Kiddush Hashem, he's called a Kadosh. That's one level of death, and you're absolutely right to say that. I'm referring to a different concept. The big tzaddikim in the Torah, they died in this manner. It was the most painless, most smooth death, like the Gemara in Brachos describes, like pulling a strand of hair out of milk. There was no resistance whatsoever. That's called a neshika, a kiss. As it were, Hashem kissed the tzaddik, and their soul almost effortlessly departs from the body. That means a total connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, just like the tzaddik becomes totally connected, doesn't care about this world, not dragged down by all of his gashmis, all of his possessions. It's all about me and Hashem. That is called a chibur. A chevron then is a chibur between people and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's Gan Eden, and that's the portal of Gan Eden. All right, so we've got abstract. I'm going to get practical too. We're heading down. This is an area called Talpiot. It's mostly industrial in Yerushalayim. It's been expanded. We're already very, very close to what they call the Green Line, which is the area that they drew with, I'm not kidding, with a green pen when they made the armistice agreements on the maps in 1948, when they made peace in this part of town with Jordan. And so we're just about to drive into the area that before the Six-Day War in 1967 was Jordan. It meant that a lot of the great holy sites were out of our reach. We'll be passing what's called Kever Rachel. You went to earlier this year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's walking distance right in the direction we're going right now. But unfortunately, it's surrounded by a hostile Arab village called Beit Lechem. You'll get out. I encourage you also to open your eyes and not just be absorbed with what goes on the bus, but look around as we go. I mean, now you're in a very relatively modern city, built up. Soon we'll be going out into the Judean wilderness, and you'll see much of Eretz Yisroel, at least that part that's not built up, that looks sort of like it looked back in the day when the Avos were walking here. And one of the reasons why I'm thrilled we got it, I have to say, today almost didn't happen so many times. I'm shocked we're actually on the bus. Some of us have been pushing for it mightily, and Baruch Hashem, we have not gone to Chevron as a yeshiva in years.
Why not?
No, it was. Sean and Gimel didn't go, except if you happen to be on the bus the day after the banquet, and this sneaky guy named Menashe Bleiweiss, not Rabbi Bleiweiss, because I didn't want to go out to my colleagues, right? But Menashe Bleiweiss would happen to be on the bus the day after the banquet, and what are you guys all doing here? And we had our own private fun day in Chevron, but it's an official trip.
Why didn't you allow it?
So it's perceived as dangerous. Look, we have a wonderful program. You know about it, right? And if we somehow get a name of a place that goes to daredevil places, and parents might think, oh, they don't take care of our boys, right? You get the dishes on the case; they'll defend us. Remember that? Yeah, right. But yeah, we have to have diplomacy. Honestly, I said Islam, I'm not sure why statistically it's any more or less dangerous or safe than any other place in Eretz Yisroel these days. Yesterday, a man was murdered, a Jewish man was murdered, a kibbutznik, lefty kibbutznik from the Jezreel Valley, which is in most people's minds perceived as the safest place. Or just some Arab, an Israeli Arab, that means he has Israeli citizenship, simply went out and started shooting people. And he shot him point blank range. Shot him to death. Right, so nothing's safe. You're safe when you're learning Torah. We'll try and do a lot of that together today. You'll see remnants. Look, you see olive trees. Right? You see the Arbat Minim. We'll pass on the way. Keep your eye alert. We'll pass olive trees. We'll pass examples of all the 7 species. You'll see grapevines in this area. Who of the 12 tribes? Whose tribe are we driving through? And will we be driving through the entire day? Nachlas Yehuda. So in Or Sameach, to be fair, we're in Binyamin. Binyamin is north of the city and actually has some of the key parts of the Temple Mount. But Yehuda's in the south, also has part of the Temple Mount, part of the base of Mikdash is in Yehuda, and this entire region is the historical region of Yehuda, who gets the blessing from his father, Oisri Lagefen Iro. And some want to say that blessing, that we darshan it, you look at Mefarshim on the Pasuk, and they darshan it usually in the direction of the days of Mashiach, that grapevines, and of course what comes from grapevines, wine and grape juice, are a sign of great prosperity, and these signify the Yemos Mashiach, the days of the final redemption. But in addition to that, historically, that we have testimony to this effect, and we see it today, and I find it quite thrilling. You see a fulfillment of the direct blessing from Yaakov to Yehuda. You see grapevines everywhere. Now, they're tended mostly by Arabs. They don't quite realizing that they're bringing to life this blessing that Yaakov had towards his own children, not towards the Ishmaelim, not towards the Arabs themselves. But okay, for the time being, they're the land caretakers while the Jews are all busy with high tech.
Chevron's also Yehuda?
Chevron is deep in Yehuda. Yehuda, which of course also is Shimon. If we go straight here, we're mamash about a 5-minute walk away from Kever Rachel.
Mama Rachel cried for us again. Should let it here for your dear children.
There's great expansion in this area. Every time I come, there's more buildings, right? People say it's for security reasons. The more Jews are here, then of course there's more of an established presence. Who knows? Kadosh Baruch Hu provides security. We're going to go through the Tunnels Road on the way into what's called Gush Etzion. Here's what we're going to see in the next 40 minutes or so. We'll go through what's called Gush Etzion, which is a modern name, not a biblical name. It's named for actually one of the German Jews who came in the 1930s, whose name was Holtzman. Holtz is tree. So Eitz Sion, Eitz is trees, so they named it for him. He's one of the original settlers who came as a Jew to try to reestablish the area around Yerushalayim, deeply in Arab territory. The area was destroyed. There were 4 kibbutzim that ultimately were established in the mid to late 40s, and actually the day before the Declaration of Independence, on May 14th, 1948, which is Hey Iyar, the terrible tragedy, these 4 kibbutzim were massacred. These 4 that were holding out to try to defend themselves, and so it became a very emotional day, just as these Jews, this Jewish territory fell in great tragedy. And these are people who were a lot of religious Jews, incredibly idealistic, Moser Nefesh, to try to come back to Eretz Yisroel and build. Gush Etzion was destroyed. There was an iconic tree, the Alon tree, an oak tree, that's today you can see it outside of Alon Shvut near the yeshiva there, Alon Shvut Yeshiva. And for the next 19 years, between 48 and 67, survivors of the victims of the massacre of the 4 kibbutzim would go, actually where I used to live in Telstone, and actually look at the tree. You could see the tree from a great distance. And they would reminisce, and they would long for their former homes. And in 67, when they conquered this area back from Jordan, and Jews started to think about coming back and reestablishing a presence here, the settler movement that we have to talk about today too, if we have time. So one of the first places that they decided to live in was in Gush Etzion. Anybody been to the museum in Kfar Etzion? It's a museum presentation about the story. We just passed Jewish Gilo, and above us is Arabic Beit Jala. Gilo and Beit Jala.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Christian Arab village, but today it's taken over by extremists, by people who are hotheads, so even the Christians have kind of followed suit. I used to commute every day. I was the director of a yeshiva in the late 90s in Efrat, called Yeshiva Miftar. And the week after I stopped this commute, which became very normal, I said Tfilas Derech every day. So the Rosh Yeshiva, he should live and be healthy. The Rosh Yeshiva was actually detoured. He couldn't go into these tunnels. He had to go through Beit Jala, and his car was hijacked by terrorists, and he barely survived. When we were visiting him, he was beaten up, distinguished Talmid Chacham, right up there. Now you're looking at biblical Eretz Yisroel. You see what I'm talking about?
Rabbi, who's the Rosh Yeshiva?
Rav Chaim Bravender. So now we're in the West Bank, right? As they call it, that's the left-wing name for it. You're familiar with all these things? West Bank, because that way you're implying that the East Bank is in Jordan. That's the East Bank of Jordan, but this is the West Bank, and it's all one contiguous land plot, and it all belongs to the Arabs in their mind view, and that's how the left-wingers have it. The right-wingers like to stick to the biblical name Yesha Yehuda v'Shomron, and this is Yehuda. And you're seeing, if you look around, you see some of the grapevines, the vineyards. This is one of the checkpoints, and shortly up on the left side you'll see Dehesha, a refugee camp. A couple words, not significant really, but something to be aware of. When the Arabs fled, as many did, in the war of, they call the War of Independence, Milchamet Tashach, in 47, 48, 49, the other surrounding countries were not eager to host them. Jordan and Lebanon and Egypt. And so they created camps, refugee camps, where they forced these people to live in poverty and squalor and misery and wouldn't allow them to go out, and they made it a diplomatic problem for the Israelis. They said, this is the Israelis' fault. Clever strategy. Everything bad that happens that they do, they just blame the Israelis. This is still a refugee camp, and people who try to seek a better life outside are sometimes branded as collaborators with the Israeli enemy and are targeted and sometimes killed or other tragedies that meet them. There's this big, you can see the separation fence that indicates that something is on the other side. Not a happy place. Jewish Beitar is, if we were to make a right turn coming up, we get to Beitar. Beitar was the pulled out fortress, if you remember the story of the Bar Kokhba revolt. So that's somewhere in that area. There's the archaeologists, not that they know that much, but they think that there's an area nearby that was the original site of Beitar, where Bar Kokhba himself was besieged by the Romans until they finally broke down the walls and killed almost everybody except for Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel.
How did he survive?
He got away. It's not clear exactly how. Bar Kokhba's uncle, if you remember, Rabbi Lazar Amodai, was davening the whole time, and Bar Kokhba went over thinking he was a collaborator, and he killed him. And when he fell, the whole village fell.
Why did he kill everyone?
Why did the Romans kill everyone? They didn't like us much. Esav hates Yaakov. But you know that. We were in Auschwitz together. We saw another iteration of that. Age old. In the end of days, there'll be major fights. We're going to take on Esav, one of the Klipos, the Kabbalistic Klipos of evil in the world, and Amalek. We'll take on Yishmael, right? That's where we're surrounded by Yishmael in this region. And of course, the most devious of the three Klipos is the Erev Rav, is all the bad midos that we manifest in our own lives. That's why we learn Musar. What else do you know about Chevron? Why is it significant? Chevron was first, I made reference to this, but I didn't have a chance to flesh out the idea. Chevron was chosen before there was a capital, before there was a Yerushalayim or a Kodesh. Chevron was settled by David HaMelech himself, and when he was king for the first 7.5 years of his monarchy, he lived in Chevron, making Chevron the capital of, as it was at the time, the Jewish world. Not all the Jews rallied around David, but that changed. And later he conquered Yerushalayim and made Yerushalayim, of course, the eternal capital of the Jews. But Chevron was big. Chevron is one of the six, one of the six biblical major cities. Of the six, they're equidistant all across Eretz Yisrael, north, south, east, west. There are three of them on this side of the Jordan River. Chevron, the southernmost one, then Shechem and Kadesh. Nobody has an idea what I'm talking about?
Here in Miklat?
Are Miklat, cities of refuge. You know what those were?
Kadesh Yearflats.
Right? 6 cities of refuge. In fact, those are the 6 ones that function even if the unintentional murderer was aware or not of what they did. This is a turn off towards Beit Lechem. You could make here, or also towards the northernmost part of the Frat on the left. So the 6 Ari Miklat, Chevron was one of them. Chevron was a center of Jewish life, center of life for the non-Jews as well, for much of history. You're getting the vineyards, Avishai? You understand what I was talking about? Coming back to Eretz HaKodesh, sometimes our lives are way too modern and we have this cognitive dissonance. We forget, wait, I'm a Yid, I'm alive today in 57, 85. I'm Zocha to just live in Yerushalayim and travel to Chevron and be in these holy places. The original road down here, not this one we're on. This is actually this is an extension of a newer road that was built in the year 2000. But the original road was built in 1888 by the Turks. It was a rickety old thing, and then Baruch Hashem they upgraded it, right? And we're about to connect to the original route of the Turkish road. They paved it since then. But this is how people traveled. Around the corner, you're going to suddenly see the tennis courts in the front. And that's how, when they were trying to sell this to upscale Jews to move to Eretz HaKodesh, they had to bill it. They called it the Scarsdale of the West Bank to make it attractive, and it's nice. It's a nice place to live. Unfortunately, this the site of a lot of tragedy. All these places over what they call the Green Line in what was formerly Jordan. I've seen a lot of terrorism, a lot of terrible activities. What's Das Torah on this? First of all, what is Das Torah? What do the big rabbis say about the idea that Jews, and many of these Jews are religious Jews, mostly with knitted kippahs? You see this, the ideology to settle here is mostly from the national religious world. Occasionally Haredim come out here too. What I pointed to is Beitar. Beitar is here, and that's a mostly Haredi city. But most of this is Dati Leumi, or sometimes secular. What did the Gedolim say about the idea that Jews will come out and settle in this part of the world? Good thing, bad thing? They don't care, they care. Hear about this? It seemed to me this is an important question. I don't know if this is on your agenda at all, but it's something, if you're a Jew alive today, you should have an opinion about this. Clearly these people are Moser Nefesh. If you ask them why they live here, I think they would say, Moser Nefesh means they're very devoted. They're willing to devote their lives to the cause. Ooh, they're upgrading the road even still. Look at this. This is new for me. So they would say that the Arabs, our enemy today, only understand strength. If you make peace treaties with them, they understand it as an invitation for more hostility. Ironically, not that makes any sense, but that's the way that they have it. So Jews simply settle all over Eretz Yisrael, make their presence known, and say, "We're here. We're not going anywhere." Arabs may not like it, but begrudgingly they'll get used to it, and it'll become a fact on the ground. And so they build and they live and they bring their children and they establish a presence here. That's the ideology. Rabbi Marcus, Rabbi Friedman, Rabbi Paulson, if you have anything to add or subtract from what I'm saying, by all means.
Rabbi, can you add, what are the Gedolim saying?
I'm going to say, I'm trying to first present one perspective. So they do believe that if we make a peace treaty, let's say we were to trade land for peace, which is usually the way, up until this current war, that's how the left-wing camp always envisioned the end game would be, that there'd be a negotiation and ultimately a Palestinian state. Today that all looks kind of like a fairy tale. Hard to imagine anything like that ever happening. But these people would say no. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and they start with Gush Etzion, and the next thing they'll take is Tel Aviv. The leader of the Palestinian movement, the founder of it, Yasser Arafat, he said as much he didn't realize he was being recorded in live camera, but he was being recorded in a mosque in Johannesburg, South Africa. And he said when he had recently signed in 1994, he had signed the Oslo Accords, which promised some two-state ultimate solution, which was compromise and peace, and all of his colleagues called him a traitor to the cause. No, we got to kill all the Israelis. He said with a wink and a smile, he said, don't worry. First of all, he made a reference to an old Quran idea, Kuber Bani Quraish, we don't have to keep our words. Usually we don't have to keep our word usually to the infidel, to the non-believers, but now he was including the Jews in that, even though that's against Islam, because Islam formally accepts the Jews as monotheists. But so that's how Arafat had. He said, but don't worry, we won't have to keep our word on this one either. Something that maybe today looks a little bit more understandable given the nature of our enemies and the intractable their position. That this is Efrat, and that's this is a place called Elazar, named for one of the 5 sons of Matisyahu, the family of the Hashmonaim. We know from the Hanukkah story. He's said to have died there when he attacked the Romans. They used to be the Greeks' latest arsenal was using live elephants, and he attacked and killed an elephant. Didn't realize though those things could be lethal if they fall on you, and that's how he died. So, what's Das Torah? What's Das Torah on the settlement? Rav Shach was the most outspoken. Rav Shach was the great Rosh Yeshiva Panovich. That was my yeshiva, by the way. I was directed there for a couple of years. Miftar. Nice place, little Kollel.
Where are you living?
I lived in Telstone. I commuted.
What is that like?
I came before traffic, like I do now, and learned the base measures early in the morning. Good routine. Yeah. Anyway, Das Torah. I'll try to get I'll finish the sentiment. So Rav Shach said this is not the way, not the path to Geula. That this is seeing real politics in an overly literal way. That somehow, if you through political activism, you can somehow raise the Jewish cause and banner, that somehow that will hasten the Mashiach's arrival. He says you're playing into the hands of our enemies, of Esav, of Ishmael. He said the path to redemption has always been, and he quoted Pirkei Avos and he quoted the Vilna Gaon, has been through the Jews and their ability to come back to Hashem, make tshuva, learn Torah, be medaktik in mitzvos. That's, and only that will bring about better times. And in the meantime, these settlements will simply get us embroiled in endless bloodshed and controversy. It'll land us in the front pages of all the newspapers in the world, and never favorably. It'll give justification to our enemies for all their wickedness. They'll attack us because they'll say, look at the Jews also have terrorists. And Taka, we do. We have Jews sometimes from these areas, who commit terrible acts against our enemies and give fuel to the other side. So he said, no, the way to redemption is one, and you'll say it's a passive one, but they know things that we don't know, these Gedolim. That's why they have Das Torah. That's why they have the authority. That area over there we just passed is the turnout to Gush Etzion. We'll come back there later today. There's the yeshiva there, the yeshiva that was founded by Rav Amital and Rav Lichtenstein. They created something that's unique, and as far as I know, maybe my colleagues can tell me if there's anything else like that, but I'm unaware of a major yeshiva in the world today that has a focused, high-level center for learning Tanakh. They study the Chumash, they study the Navi, Ksuvim on a high intellectual level where there's an emphasis, and people go into it as a full-time kind of study. It's an unusual thing in the world today. Do we know anything like this? Marcus, you look like you're about to say maybe? Anything like this?
The yeshiva in the people went to Vilna and all that?
Silverman.
No, that's a Silverman yeshiva. No, they also learn that from a young age. We'll pass one if time permits. I have big ambitions in Chevron. We may not have time for them all. But in Chevron, they actually have a Silverman school where the kids from they're Mekayim this mission in Pirkei Avos, right? Then Chamesh Mikra. At 5 years old, they start learning it. But I'm saying over here, they actually have a high level. Talmidei Chachamim are learning it, not just little kids learning Chumash, memorizing it by rote, but actually people learning with all the Mefarshim and really trying to, and with Chazal and trying to be Mambi and trying to understand. We're now south of the Gush, which means most of the village
my understanding is that the Russian yeshiva of the Gush have the ideology that they can give over land for peace. That's right.
Well, the two.
And if so,
now they passed away, both of them, Rav Amital and Rav Letishin. They had complicated views. They were huge Talmidei Chachamim Tzaddikim, but they had very unusual ideas, certainly for their constituency, which is the modern Orthodox Dati Leumi national religious world is overwhelmingly right-wing. We associate the Mennonite population with coming and dwelling out here. They had more what we call peacenik ideas of, like you said, trading land for peace as an option if it would indeed lead to a lasting peace. Look, they were not alone. Rav Avad Yosef Zatzal also had such an idea. He wrote about in the 70s and 80s that if we would find genuine partners in peace, it would be worth saving Jewish lives to be able to trade land for such an agreement, a pact. Rav Avad came back from that and said, yeah, but we don't have such partners. And so he said such a possibility is a pipe dream, is not realistic.
But how did people react to the Gush?
They mostly ignored them. Rav Lichtenstein was a celebrated figure as a figure, but his Das Torah was not listened to. And in that world, that's generally a problem, that a lot of the bigger people are sort of ignored when they have views that don't fit the party line. And when he died, suddenly a gadol had died, even though they ignored this major part of his teaching. More grapevines. In Chevron itself, if your ears are popping a little bit, it's because we're approaching the highest point in this region, almost 1,000 meters above sea level. Chevron, not quite, but it's the highest city in the world. And most of Chevron, again, historically, it was a Jewish place, right? With endless stories, endless great people who were there. Bad people were there too. Shabtai Tzvi got a major reception here. He wowed and charmed all the great Rabbanim when he came through Chevron in the 1660s, and they said he's Mashiach. And that was a mistake, but well-intentioned mistake. And everybody came through. The Chidah, the holy Chidah, who a century later came through. He was stationed in Chevron too when he wasn't traveling collecting money for the Jews. Karmei Tzur is the one Jewish village between the Gush and Chevron. So, but Chevron is a massive urban sprawl. Hundreds of thousands of Arabs are between here and Chevron in many modern cities. Anybody from Los Angeles, for example? Where does one part of Los Angeles start, the other one start? It's just one big urban sprawl. So to here, you just have Arabs everywhere. Including in some of the better parts of Chevron. What we will not be able to see today in Chevron include the site of the holy yeshiva. It was actually only there for 5 years. The Knesset Yisroel Yeshiva. Anybody know about the yeshiva? Knesset Yisroel, who's it named for? Who is the Yisrael of the title? Named for the founder of the Musar movement, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And it was a breakoff of the great Knesset Yitzchak Yeshiva in Slobodka. In Slobodka, which was in Kovno, Shana Gimel. We went to Kovno at the very last stop last year. We were right near Rabbi Yisrael Salanter where the yeshiva was. Right, so they named the yeshiva in Chevron for him. It was there for 5 years, and the building is still there. We won't see it today because it's in the Arab part of Chevron. When they had to break off the Jewish part from the Arab part, we didn't get that part. The yeshiva was reestablished in Yerushalayim. Today it's one of the great top-level yeshivas called now Chevron. They renamed it after they were evacuated from the old city. Chevron was a site, the granddaughter of the Balatanya, the founder of Lubavitch Hasidus. Her name Menucha Rachel came to Chevron, and she was a dynamo. And when she came, many other Lubavitcher Hasidim followed, making Chevron in the 19th century and 20th century, among other sites, a site of gathering of many Lubavitchers. And you'll see actually when we come in the tourist center that's been built in the last few decades, the major center is built by an Australian businessman named Gutnick, Joseph Gutnick, who gets a lot of money to different causes, and he's a Chabadnik.
Why do some of the buildings have white and black?
So the black you see are the equivalent of solar panels, right? And usually, because it's just simply a design, it's an architectural design, and it almost always all over the country when you travel, you see, oh, these are Arabs. One of the ways they build things. The white is just a newer, updated version of the same. They're water heaters.
Well, that's how you're supposed to distinguish. But
That's one way. Usually, also you can tell when they're red tiled roofs. That usually shows you that they're Jewish.
Most importantly is that the Arabs do not build symmetrical houses. They just throw them down
Right.
places.
Well, look at most.
See rows of houses.
Rabbi Friedman points out they're not symmetrical houses, but there's something else that's really interesting. Notice that a lot of the houses have no windows. Did you ever pick that up?
Yeah.
Weird. What's going on with that?
You can afford them.
Well, no, smarter. Right? They're not stupid.
So they can shoot through the windows better.
They shoot through the windows. No, even a more economical reason. They in the land registry, it's defined as a house we have to pay taxes. It's finished, in other words, when you put up windows. If you don't have windows, you can evade taxes. All over the country, you see it like that.
They just live without windows.
Okay, it gets drafty in the winter. What do you want? Don't confuse me with rational thinking. These are areas that we're passing through. Yehuda, Maccabi, came and fought one of his great battles in this region. Somewhere where we passed, he was killed in one of the battles. All the 5 sons of the Matisyahu died terrible deaths. Is certainly among them. The Ramban, in his Perush on the Chumash, he also breaks from form a little bit, and he says, when you're coming to Chevron, you should be excited. You should realize this is the city of the Avos Imahos. This is the city of Adam and Chava. This is the city the Jews really tried to cling to, if they were permitted, for all of history. I don't know if you're still with me. I lost a few of you, but I think I've got a lot of eye contact, which is shocking to me at this stage in my talking. But let's keep it going. Chevron is one of the few places that's almost certainly Chevron, almost certainly identified as its authentically correct place. I don't know if you realize what I just said and why it's important. You know, a lot of places we really can't authenticate. Is this really the place? One of the reasons is that we've been out of it. We've been in Golis all these centuries. There's been nobody present to maintain the tradition, so we have to rely on lots of different things, some more credible than others, like Arabic names for places. I drove Rabbi Pittem further than I usually drive him in the evening yesterday. Yeah, I do. Okay, we have to make a quick pit stop to pick up water. The water didn't come this morning.
Couldn't pick it up in a Jewish area?
We just thought about it now. Kosher water, hopefully so.
Rabbi Pittem?
Yeah, so I was driving to Pittem. We passed what's called Tel Ir Shamus, or Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh was a place. The most significant distinction in the Tanakh is that it was the location of the Aron Kodesh for a short period before the Jews blew it there and they had to move it to Telstone to carry Yarim. But there's a Tel that's being excavated. Why do we think that's the Tel? One of the major reasons is because the Arabs called it something that sounds like Beit Shemesh. So sometimes you have a name that sounds right, sometimes it's geographical location, but how do you know? The place is the place. The Kivrei Tzaddikim, some of us have talked about this extensively. Who's to say that these are the Tzaddikim? We don't know more than we do know. What's mysterious to us is a long list. What's known to us is a very short list. Yerushalayim is known to us. Why can I say that with confidence? Simple.
What, the Temple Mount.
There's never been a break. People have been living in Yerushalayim, and if not Jews, but Jews who've been staring longingly, wanting to go back there, and the non-Jews who are maintaining authority there, sovereignty there, they're maintaining it, they're calling it by whatever continuous name they call it. Whether it was the Romans calling it Ele Capitolina, or the Arabs calling it Al-Quds. But that was the place, so there's no mistaking it. Harabais is Harabais. It's the fixation of the world. Wars are fought in other part of the universe because of people fighting for rights to Harabais. That's how significant Eretz Yisroel is, and Yerushalayim particularly. Chevron It's one of the few places in the world you can make a similar statement. It's been, throughout history, continuously settled, not always by Jews, but if it wasn't by Jews, it was by Jewish competitors who were saying, Jews can't be here because it's ours. For about 700 years, Chevron was really off limits to Jews. Right? And then in the 1800s, they started coming back. 700 years. It's a long time. Yeah, we were sneaky. We got back anyway. We were resourceful. We find ways. What do you see? All grapevines. All grapevines. Right? Ostrula Gefiniro. Yaakov Bracha. Still visible. Oh, see the red tile roofs? Okay, now we're in the outskirts. The Chevron was evacuated. I don't know if you heard about it. We'll be talking about it in 1929. The Hebrew calendar year Tarpat. Arab riots erupted all over Eretz Yisroel. We talked about Chabad just now. Chabad was related to that, partly because the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the father-in-law of the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, visited the area of the Kosel and set off riots. The Arabs said, they're trying to establish Jewish dominance, hegemony in this area, and that led to riots and whatnot. And the Tarpat riots ended with the massacre of the majority of of a lot of the Jews in Chevron. Not the majority, a lot of Jews in Chevron, and the evacuation of the survivors. One of the dark chapters in modern history. Sometimes we focus on Holocaust education, we don't realize that there were other terrible tragedies like this. In 1942, the Jews of Baghdad were massacred. We don't read about it because it was 1942 and other things were happening in greater proportions elsewhere. If you need a bathroom, go, but don't spend long. Don't spend long. Now, we just came in to what's called, it's an extension of Kiryat Arba. Just in case you're looking at what's going on here, is this Chevron, is it not Chevron? It's an extension. The modern story is after the 6-Day War, the Jews tried to resettle in Chevron. They had a couple of aborted attempts. The army dragged them out. They went back. They're very aggressive, the settlers. Yeah? And in the end, in 1970s, they said, okay, compromise. We'll throw you a bone on an empty mountain immediately east of Chevron. We'll set up a new place. We'll call it Kiryat Arba. Even though Chevron and Kiryat Arba are the same place in the Torah, but we'll give a new settlement. We'll call Kiryat Arba. That's where we're driving right now. Today, I said it's about 8,000 Jews living in Kiryat Arba, independent of the Jewish settlement that later was set up in Chevron itself. We'll see Jews there. It's split. It's a lot of Russian Jews are here. It's split about halfway down the middle between religious and secular, which makes for a strange combo. Makes having an Eruv not so simple if you know Hilchos Eruvin, carrying on Shabbos and such. You have people not keeping Shabbos. And a complicated place that you kind of have to be ideologically committed to live here. Ideologically committed to living here, because you're deep in the area of the enemy. All around you don't perceive it because we're driving this very nice scenic village. But all around here are enemies, are people who would like you dead. But they feel that this is the way. We're going to be driving through Kiryat Arba. From Kiryat Arba, we'll drive into Chevron, which has seen a lot of tragedy, and you'll see that. You'll see lots of buildings in the Jewish part of Chevron, which is one small fraction of the major city. It looks sort of like a ghost town. A lot of empty buildings where Arabs once lived, but they were evacuated for what they call security reasons, and it has that kind of eerie effect of walking around. And yet some Arabs have passes, so you'll see Arabs walking around. And there are events that take place there. That's why there's such a large presence of soldiers and police, Israeli soldiers and police, and they're Jews who actually started coming. There's a great story I'd like to tell at the very end of Jews who came back starting in the late 70s to set up shop and actually live in places in Chevron where Jews lived historically. There's a place called the Avram Avinu Shul, named for Avram Avinu, and a great legend about maybe Avram Avinu, we said, didn't die. The Gedolim didn't die there. And you have a place called the Beit Hadassah, which was a hospital where Jews were we're living in today. I've gone back, and now there's another place where Jews live. I don't think we're going to get there today. We scheduled, because of the zip lining, we scheduled a very short visit to Chevron, but on a longer visit, I strongly urge you to go up the hill to one of the oldest, most important Batei Kfaros, cemeteries in the world, and in Eretz Yisroel, of Chevron. There you could find the graves of the student of the Rav Chaim Vital, the Reishis Chochma, Davidish, came to Chevron in his later years, died in Chevron. You have one of the great commentaries on the Mishnah, the Meleches Shlomo. I don't mind if you talk, because I talk a lot, and I realize it's hard to listen, which is totally fine. But if you are talking, just talk softly, because I know some people are into it and other people are not, and totally fine either way. But just be considerate. And I was going to say, one of the great stories at the Sdei Chemed. Correct. The Sdei Chemed is not just a camp, in fact, but the name of an encyclopedia that was written by one man. Today, and the Encyclopedia Talmudit, they have a staff of 100 people, right? One man wrote this encyclopedia. It's astounding. He lived 100 years ago and settled with Chizkel Medini, and he said, we're now moving into Chevron as we're driving. And the Menucha Rochel, I said, from the granddaughter of the Balatanya, and many luminaries are up there. I took my twins when they were 7 here for a surprise birthday visit, and this is actually a nice story just to give you a sense of clarity. People don't come here and they don't realize, but when my kids were growing up, they traded not baseball cards, they traded Makomos Kedoshim cards, and so they knew all about Mechevron. They didn't know where the crazy Abba was taking them. But the public bus that we took was on the same route, and as we rounded the corner and actually saw the building of the Mars Machpelah, I looked at my 7-year-olds' faces, and they just were stunned. Their jaws dropped open. Whoa, Abba, didn't know you're taking us here. So Baruch Hashem, we are very grateful to Hashem to enable us to come to this holy site where every Kadosh, every holy Jew, to visit Eretz Yisroel from time immemorial would certainly make it his priority to stop in Chevron. Yer Kodesh. The Ramban kept a travelogue. He describes coming here very emotionally. Mavadi Bartanura came here in 1488, and we have testimony. Many of them got down into the actual crypt, but we can't see today. Let me say now, we're just about to get off the bus. We'll be off the bus for a few hours, including we'll be davening Mincha, at one point. So bring what you need with you for a couple hours. Drink. I would drink a lot now, and so you don't need to carry water with you, because we'll get back to the bus when we go to ziplining. I'm going to try to get as much as I can. My same request that I made now, if you're not interested, totally fine and understandable too, but just step away and don't disturb the group that is interested and wants to hear and learn. I encourage you to try to stay close, because I'm going to say stuff that will probably answer your questions. There's, among other things, the building of the Mars Mechel itself is very confusing and needs to be clear on what is this thing, this monstrosity. The building on top. It's not the original cave, and that requires some stories and explanation to give some sense what's going on there. We'll get off. There is a potential bathroom stop right next to the Gutnick Center. Quickly use the bathroom, and then we'll assemble right near the cave and try to lay out what's going on there. This is the Jewish part of Chevron. You're seeing right now this iconic building, the Mars Machpelah, which is indeed the building itself. The building is identified as Herodian. Herod was a Jewish convert who lived in the late Second Temple period and built up Mars Machpelah. And so the building is Herodian. The structure was taken over. It was just a shell of a building, not really used for much. It was not clear what the intention was. Not clear if it was Herod or somebody copying his style. But you'll see it looks a little bit like the Western Wall, a similar kind of architectural style. Later, Berbers of the people called the Mamelukes, an Arab nation centered in Cairo, they would come up and build up that entire building as a mosque. And so when we get into the actual building, it'll be a little bit confused because there's all this calligraphy and what's going on here. That's a mosque that sits, and the whole building itself sits on top of what we believe to be the original cave where where our ancestors are buried. Okay, follow me.
They have hot spots. So, right Amen.